Hello. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out to see Heathers the musical. And thank you for coming out to this pre-show event. This is our first of three during this run here at Oglethorpe. And I'll just introduce myself. I'm Natalie Holly Perviance. I'm the development director at Actors Express Theater. And we're here with Freddie Ashley, our artistic director, who's also directing this run of Heathers the musical, and Matt Huff, who is the director of the theater department here at Oglethorpe. So for those of you who don't know, Heathers the musical is based on the 1989 American Black comedy teen film starring Winona Ryder, Christian Slater, Shannon Doherty, and it portrays four teenage girls, three of whom are named Heather, in a clique at a high school. When one of them becomes enamored by a new student intent on murdering the popular students and staging their deaths as suicides. Described as a dark, cynical, subversive comedy, it's a film that inspired the rock musical of the same name that has been produced in New York, LA, London's West End, Brazil, and has been requested by high schools for licensing rights multiple times. So we're gonna take it back a bit. For Matt and Freddie, how familiar were you with the film version of Heathers, and what were your first impressions? Matt, I'll start with you.
In high school, I was really into dark comedies and weird films and foreign films. The weirder, the better. But I have zero recollection of watching this movie, and I had to have seen it because I remember some key lines. But a student brought in a clip from the movie last year as a part of a project, the final scene, and I looked at that scene and I thought, I don't remember this at all. So yeah, that's my very different from Fred.
I have a completely opposite experience. I saw the movie in 1989 when it was released. I was 16 years old, and it instantly spoke to me and became one of my favorite films. I think there's something about the movie that speaks to outsiders, and I was a quintessential outsider at my high school, being an artsy, gay, sensitive, intelligent kid at a pretty small town, rural place was very difficult. And there was something that I loved about the satire, even at that age, of the hypocrisy of middle America and how we react to tragedies and spin them out for personal gain. And I rewatched the movie I don't know how many times over the years, and I was just telling someone earlier that to this day it's one of my top 3 favorite movies of all time.
Can you share how this partnership came together, Oglethorpe and Actors Express?
Sure. When Freddie first approached me, Actors Express was not able to use their theater due to the COVID safety regulations at that time. So you were just looking for a place to do some work.
We actually initially envisioned we wanted to do a show outside, and we're thinking of places that had wide areas, grassy areas that we could throw up a tent potentially. And so that was, I think, the first conversation we had, and it ultimately evolved into, let's do this as a partnership between the theater and the department and pool our resources and maybe have something that is greater than the sum of its parts come out on the other end.
So then after you decided to work together, you're looking for this space for Actors Express after, obviously we're coming out of the pandemic and we're looking for more space. What prompted you to look at Heathers in particular for this partnership?
Well, when Matt and I were discussing the production that we would partner on, we had a long list, as I recall, of musicals. And there were some on there that were a little more dramatic and serious-minded or somber, some that had a slightly chillier or even more cynical bent. I know that, imagine me gravitating toward a cynical show. But I think when we were looking at the list, I think it was actually you who said, no, let's look at this one. Let's look at Heather's as the one we zero in on. And I had no argument there because I think it's a great show. And I was resistant to it for years because of my love for the movie and my general distaste for sort of cash and grab musical adaptations of films. And I always kind of felt like that's what this show was. And then the more I listened to it, the more I sort of examined it and read it, I realized this is actually a really impeccably put together musical. The score is extremely thoughtful. The libretto is very, very, very smart in the way they took this 1989 adaptation and brought it into something that would be accessible to a contemporary audience discovering the story for the first time. And it ends up also having a completely different emotional trajectory than the movie, and ultimately is warmer than the movie. Same story, same events, but ultimately with a different emotional sensibility. And that actually really appealed to me because it was doing something different than the movie was doing. So why would I have a bad attitude about it just because it wasn't the movie? It couldn't be the movie and didn't need to be.
And from a theater program perspective, I'm always looking for shows that use a lot of young actors. So this certainly fit the bill for that. So we've typically been doing a musical in the fall. And all of them, if you were to look at history, they're all big ensemble type shows. And this show has a really great ensemble of young performers to showcase. So
I know, Matt, you said that the film version didn't really make a mark on you in any particular way after you watched it, but the film has this cult following, and people are quoting, are still quoting lines out of this film from 1989, and even the musical now has a cult following. What is it about this story that seems to be resonating with people for such a long time? I mean, even with your cast, many of whom weren't even born yet when this film came out. What about this story?
I think, some of the issues and themes explored in the play are just a part of a teenage experience. Unfortunately, bullying is something that clearly is not going away for that age group particularly. And in the age of social media, I think you don't even have to go to school to be bullied anymore, to feel like an outsider. So I think just emotionally, it speaks to a lot of those issues that teens go through, not just in America, but all around the world.
Do you think that a musical treatment of these very difficult conversations you mentioned, teen bullying, there's suicide, there's sexual assault, there's school violence, these are all very difficult subjects to approach. One wouldn't necessarily think that treating those subjects with a musical would be the first approach, but what about it makes it work?
I think the songs provide a window into the character's psychology and emotional life that you just don't get with the movie. And you get to see and hear what they're thinking and feeling in a much more nuanced and kind of heartfelt way. And in that way, it takes the themes that you just mentioned and gives them more context, more detail, and I think connects them to the audience in a way that's really emotionally powerful. And the movie just can't do that.
Well, I agree. And also the targets of the satire, as Matt said, have not changed. And yet the circumstances of our world have changed. So there's a hilarious scene in the movie in which Christian Slater, who plays JD, pulls a gun out in the cafeteria and shoots blanks at the two football stars. Well, in 1989, there was no way anyone could imagine someone opening fire in a school, really, and so that thing that was shocking, and there was a distance that didn't come from familiarity. Well, as the world has, maybe I shouldn't say progressed, but as things have changed and our world has become more violent, more unpredictable, more chaotic, those things that we could sort of poke at and laugh at before just aren't funny. And so if you're going to target the same if you're going to place your aim on the same targets for satire, you have to figure out a way to do it in a way that will be accessible to the intended audience. And while the film stands up on its own, and I think works because it is a product of its time, that film couldn't be made today and shouldn't be made today. And so the musical takes that to heart and really uses the songs to, exactly as Matt says, provide emotional context for what's happening, and a more, frankly, warm experience, while still really going after these hypocrisies of middle America and these issues of high school that many of us, have dealt with in our adult lives.
You said that, Freddie, you said that the film does not necessarily follow the same emotional trajectory that the musical does with the characters, right? Keeping in mind, even when the musical was written and now how we're approaching these different issues in the media, have you had to look at the script or make any adjustments? What have been, in general, your rules of engagement with the script and even with the cast? I mean, the cast is, you've got professional actors and you've got students here at Oglethorpe.
Well, in terms of the cultural context, nothing had to be changed because the musical is pretty contemporary. It was written about 6 or 7 years ago. So in similar circumstances we're in now. So nothing changed in terms of our approach. I think for me, what was interesting was the process of working with students and professionals in the same room. And I said to them on the first day of rehearsal, we're not going to have any hierarchy in this rehearsal process. We're all professional colleagues working on the same project. And I was pleased that the guest artists in the room took that to heart. That said, there are practical concerns, that when you are working with students, and I've done a lot of teaching and directing at universities over the years, there is a little different kind of contextualizing a piece of direction and understanding it from a technique point of view and that sort of thing that you have to do working with students. But ultimately, what it did was create this amazing synergy. The students didn't come in having the baggage of the movie, good or bad. They came in to work on this material on its own terms. They are young and exuberant and excited, and what that did to the overall energy of the process was not calculable. It was really extraordinary to watch it unfold.
What were some of the things that you were looking for? You put together this brilliant cast of triple threat performers who can act and they can sing and they can dance, and it's pretty extraordinary. What were some of the things that you were looking for? And what are some of the things that you were looking for when you're, teaching your classes and putting this program together that allows these students now to be able to perform with professionals in this partnership?
Well, in terms of what we were looking for in the casting from our end, what I always look for is a performer who is able to access a sense of truth and a commitment to truth in their work. Even in a comedy that's broad, a musical comedy that's going to play on a big stage, that's going to have a slight expansive scope to the size of the performance, you still have to go for the truth. The last thing I said to the cast in our final note session last night was, I was lucky enough to know Kenny Leon in my early days in Atlanta, and the thing I always heard him say to casts in those early days of my working at the Alliance was, just tell the truth. Just tell the truth. And if you filter everything back through that, it doesn't fail you. And so we were looking for people who, yes, had the skills to hit the notes and to learn the dances, but we also knew that we were going to be dealing with varying levels of skill and experience. But what ultimately was most important was finding people who could, within the rules of the world of this show, access a sense of honesty and truth, and always serving the dramatic moment as opposed to something about their own self-aggrandizement as performers, which you can run into sometimes. And I hope when you see the show tonight, you'll agree that they achieve that in their work, very much the students and the professionals both.
As Freddie said, there is a range of experiences in the production. I mean, the professionals bring their own level of experience and expertise, but even within the students, there are some of the cast that have vocal training and dance training and have been in a lot of musicals in high school prior to this. And we have some who have very little of that. And I think one student who's never been in a musical before. And I think one of the great gifts of our program, which is a small program at a small liberal arts institution, is that you can give opportunities like that to students that might otherwise they would be overlooked at a larger institution that is more competitive. And the only way you get better at something is to put yourself in an opportunity that is in a way bigger than you are. So just for these students to even at come to this with perhaps very little experience, to be able to rise to the challenge of the musical is just a great educational experience, and one that I think we do well here at Oglethorpe.
There are two freshmen in the show who are in the ensemble, and when they're on stage, I always find myself watching them because they're both so good and so engaged and so talented. And I have loved watching them work and grow as the people of the cast who have the least amount of experience and training. And there they are being leaders in the cast. It's a beautiful thing. And one of the things also about the cast is that this is for pretty much everyone involved in the show. I had the good fortune of directing Red Speedo a couple of months ago, but this was most everybody's first post-pandemic production. So there was something in what that meant to the company to be back at it, and this sort of renewed commitment to the work and to the theater and to performance was really something that I think kind of carried us all through the process.
Can you share a little bit about what that's like being in the rehearsal room post-pandemic, doing a big musical that's just so exciting and high energy? Were students still in class? Like, were they doing classes virtually? What was that like? I'm just curious to know what the rehearsal room experience is like post-pandemic.
Well, Oglethorpe are in-person classes. We can require masks because we're a private institution, unlike the public institutions. And we're requiring vaccination unless you have some sort of exemption. So I think we have, at the start of school, we had a 95% vaccination rate. And along with the students following good behavior and protocol, there hasn't really been an issue on campus that I am aware of in terms of health and safety. So.
And they're taking classes while they're in rehearsal?
During the day, yeah. We rehearse at night on the weekends. So their schedules are, full.
In fact, one of the students came to, I won't say which cast member, said to me one night this week, she said, it finally happened. It caught up to me. I slept through a class this morning. I said, oh no. I said, I assume you're not the kind of person who ever misses class, based on my observation of her work ethic during the process and her general attitude of stick-to-itiveness. And she said, oh no, I never miss class. So I know that she was tired this week, but but the energy was so exuberant and everyone was just so grateful to be back. We also have a vaccination requirement through the protocols we operate under through Actors Equity Association, the union we work with. And there are all kinds of policies. I was just talking to my friends, Hal and Kevin, a moment ago, who had offered so generously to bring food to tech rehearsal for the actors. And we aren't allowed to offer communal food under the protocols. And one actor brought baked goods to rehearsal, and I had to ask her to take them away because we can't have communal food because of equity safety protocols. And those kinds of moments were sort of like hard to squelch these generous impulses of community. But everyone was so happy to comply. And I also think it afforded a sense of security and safety in the process. So I think was probably a little unnerving for some people to come back while we're still in the thick of things. But the safety protocols were something they embraced as making it all possible. And so there was a real just positive vibe throughout the whole process.
And you've worked before together at some point before this partnership between Oglethorpe and Actors Express, or you've
Well, I
been-
directed out here once before, about 6 years ago, but I told Matt the other day, I don't even know if he remembers meeting me, but I first met Matt 21 years ago at an audition for Cooney Limmel at Jewish Theater of the South, and he got cast and I didn't. And I saw the show, and he was marvelous, by the way. So we've known each other for years, and a lot of mutual friends too.
Yeah, and my first job out of college was with the Alliance Education Program, and I can't remember when you started working there.
I started in the fall of 1999.
Okay, so then then we didn't overlap at that point, but I was assistant directing a show, and you must have been there then. So I know I interacted
And I
with
knew
you.
Amy Rosenberg was a common
Oh,
friend
yeah,
between
of
us for a
course.
long
She was
time.
my roommate for many years. So,
Matt, what are some of the things that you are taking back to the classroom after this show, when the students are going back to class, they're taking their acting, their dancing, their vocal classes? What are some of the things that you think this experience is teaching them, and what is it giving you when you go back to the classroom?
I think what it's giving me now, in the fall, I usually teach all freshmen, I'm just so excited for the freshmen, because this has been such an incredible opportunity for the current students and some of the freshmen that are involved. But I'm excited for the next 4 years and what that might bring for them, and the unique opportunities that our program can offer. We also have a recent alum who is the lead at the show at the Alliance. We have a current student who's filming a movie with Whoopi Goldberg. So I'm just really excited for the theater students at Oglethorpe right now. So yeah, that's.
And not for nothing, the student he's talking about, I directed her in her first show, her freshman year here at Oglethorpe, and she completed last year the Actors Express intern program. So that's Jillian is sort of also a common thread between us.
That's great.
And I cried all through Darling Corey because I was so proud of her. I couldn't
wow.
stand it.
Freddie, when you go back to the Actors Express Theater, I know we have our season is pretty much locked in. We pretty much know what we're doing for the rest of the year. But it's going to be a different experience, a 145-seat black box theater. What are some of the things, the learnings that you're bringing back to Actors Express?
Well, I think it's that sort of checking back in with why we do what we do. You can't help but have that experience when you've been working with students and younger people, which is one of the reasons why I really love to go out and guest direct at universities and do it every few years. So I think that's what I'll bring back. I mean, going back to the small house, that's what I'm used to. That's where my comfort zone is. In fact, it was a little bit of an adjustment to come back into a larger space to work, because I get the opportunity to do that so rarely. And but no, I think it's just like that check in with what's pure about why we do what we do, why we love what we do, because that's what I see when I look at, one of the 18-year-olds in the cast or one of the 20-year-olds in the cast, and it's very renewing in that respect.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. Everyone is gonna walk into the theater right now and see Heathers, the musical. It's a wonderful revival with this brilliant cast. I think the largest cast of our season at Actors Express.
Ever, at least since I've been on
ever. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's a mix of professionals and current students at Oglethorpe. Thank you again, Matt Huff, the director of the theater department here at Oglethorpe, and Freddie Ashley, our artistic director, who is currently directing the musical. Thank you, everyone. And please help us out with some refreshments.